Consistently, regardless of the climate, something strolls down our road, whistling delicately. You can hear it, assuming you're in the lounge room or the kitchen when they stroll by, and it generally begins at precisely 3:03. The sound begins faint, someplace close to the start of the path, close to Carson Place. We're towards the center of the road, so the whistling moves past us prior to disappearing toward the circular drive. At the point when I was more youthful, my sister and I would slip into the kitchen a few evenings to tune in. Mother and father could have done without that, and we'd get damnation assuming they found us out there. However, they were never too severe with us, since we generally adhered to the one major rule: try not to attempt to see whatever was whistling. My area is an interesting spot. I've lived here since I was 6, and I love it. The houses are little, however, all around kept. Great estimated yards, a lot of spots to wander. There are a great deal of different children here my age. I turned 13 back in October. We grew up together and would constantly play 4 squares in the circular drive or meander around from back patio to move yard in the mid-year. This was a decent spot to grow up. I'm mature enough to see it. Also, there's just the 2 odd things here: the late evening whistling and the best of luck. The whistling never annoyed me much. Like I said, I was unable to try and hear it from my room. However, mother and father could do without discussing it, so I've quit getting clarification on pressing issues. My father is tall and quiet. He has a compliment since he moved to the US as a youngster. His family, my grandparents, they're from the islands. That is the very thing they call it. My father, the only time he isn't so quiet is in the event that the whistler comes up. He talks somewhat speedier then. At that point, eyes move quicker, and he tells us not to consider it so much, and to constantly recall the one rule, the large rule: don't attempt to look outside when the whistler goes past. Not that we could look regardless of whether we needed to. It's just plain obvious. There are shades within each window, thick bits of weighty material that draw down from the top and lock to the lower part of the window outline. Each hook even has a little lock about the size of what you'd track down on a journal. My father locks those screens consistently before we, as a whole, hit the hay, and keeps the vital in his room. My mother, I don't have the foggiest idea of her opinion on whistling. I've seen her out in the lounge before at 3:03 when the sound begins. I could see her in the event that I aired out my entryway simply an inch to look. She's not out there frequently. Basically, I haven't gotten her much, yet a few times per month. I think she passes on there on our huge red lounge chair, simply tuning in. The whistler has a similar tune consistently. It's happy, da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-dum. Recollect how I said there are 2 odd things about where I reside. All things considered, other than our night whistler, everybody in my area is truly fortunate. It's difficult to make sense of, and father could do without us discussing this part a lot. Either, yet beneficial things simply appear to end up with people around here a great deal. Generally, it's little things, like winning a radio challenge, or getting an unforeseen advancement at work, or discovering a few pointed stones covered in the yard. You know, the genuine kind. The weather conditions are very great, and there's no wrongdoing, and everyone's nurseries sprout extra brilliantly in the fall. 1. Figuring out is so little favors. I've heard my mother say regarding living here. Yet, the fundamental explanation we stay here, why we moved here in any case, is my sister Nola. She was conceived exceptionally debilitated, something with her lungs. We were unable to bring her home when she was conceived. Just visit her in the medical clinic. She was so little. I recall little even contrasted with different children. A machine needed to relax for her. We moved into our home here to be nearer to the medical clinic. When we moved here, Nola began improving. The specialists couldn't sort it out. They credited it to anything they were doing. Yet we, as a whole, could perceive they were befuddled. Be that as it may, my folks knew, even I knew, Nola getting better was simply one more of the million little endowments we got for living in our area. So that is the reason we remained, even after we figured out that for each minor act of God that occurs here each day, from time to time, a few terrible things occur. However, they possibly occur, assuming you search for the Whistler. It couldn't be any more obvious. Our area has an inviting council. They appear with a macaroni meal and a gift bin and a manila organizer at whatever point another person moves in. They're cordial. 4 individuals made an appearance when we moved in quite a while back. The panel made casual chit-chat, gave me a Snickers bar, and alternated holding Nola. It was her most memorable week out of the emergency clinic, so they were extra cautious. Then, at that point, the advisory group requested to address my folks in private, so I was shipped off to my room, where I actually figured out how to hear practically every word. The inviting counsel enlightened my folks regarding how decent the area was. Actually, especially difficult to make sense of, sort of pleasant. And afterward, they enlightened my folks concerning the considerably harder to make sense of whistling that happened each day at 3:03 and finished at the tick of 3:05. The gathering, our new neighbors, cautioned my folks that the whistling hushed up could never mischief or hurt us, as long as we didn't search for what was uttering the sound. This part they focused, and I drove my ear into the entryway, stressing to hear them. Individuals who went searching for the whistler had their karma change. In some cases, unfortunately, a dark cloud would loom over anybody that looked. Whatever might turn out badly would. The manila envelope the panel brought over contained news cutouts, anecdotes about vehicle crashes and destroyed lives, public passings and oddity mishaps. Not every person bites the dust. I heard the top of the advisory group tell my father, "Be that as it may, life leaves them. Regardless of whether they live, there's no light in them at any point down the road, no presence." My mother, I could perceive she wasn't treating it in a serious way. She continued to inquire as to whether this was some trick they played on new neighbors. At a certain point, my mother lashed out, blamed the board of trustees for attempting to startle us out of our new home, inquired as to whether they were bigoted by virtue of my father being from the islands. My father quieted her down, told her he could perceive our new neighbors were genuine and they were simply attempting to help us. It made sense that he grew up hearing these sorts of stories from his mother, and that he realized there were unusual things that strolled among us. A portion of those unusual things were great, and some were terrible. However, most were simply unique. After the panel left, Father went out to the home improvement shop, purchased the material blinds, the hooks, and the locks, and introduced them on each window in the house after supper. That first night in our new house, I crawled out of my room at 3 a.m. just to find my father alert, sitting on the front room love seat, holding my child sister. My father held up his finger in a shh movement, yet tapped the lounge chair close to him. I sat and we paused. At precisely 3:03, we heard the whistling. Da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-dum. It came and it went, very much like our neighbors said. The whistling returns every evening, and we never look, and we partake in our million little favors consistently. Nola inhales all alone, and she's developed further. A cunning young lady, My father even joined the inviting advisory group. We don't get new neighbors frequently. How could anybody need to leave? Yet, when another family moves in, my father and the panel bring them macaroni dish, a gift container, and the manila organizer. I can constantly tell by the expression on my father's face when he returns, assuming the family treated the council in a serious way, or on the other hand, in the event that we get new neighbors again very soon. Not long ago, a family moved in directly next to us. The previous owner, Miss Maddie, passed away at age 105. She'd lived a good, long life. Our new neighbors seemed like they'd fit in just fine. They believed the welcoming committee, took my dad's advice about the locking shutters, since they had a young child of their own. Whatever newspaper clippings were in that manila envelope, whatever evidence, my dad never let us see. But I imagine it must have been awfully convincing, since our neighbors got along with no issues for the first month. One night, when our new neighbors had to leave town, they sent their son, Holden, to stay with us. He was 12, a year under me in school. I didn't know him well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off after dinner, I could tell it was going to be a bad time. "Do you know who is always out there whistling every night?" Holden asked the moment the adults left the room. The three of us were sitting in the den, some Disney movie playing idly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a glance. "We don't talk about that," I said. "I think it's that weirdo that lives in the big yellow house on the corner," Holden said. "Mr. Toles?" my sister asked. "No way. He's really nice," Holden shrugged. "Must be a psycho killer." Then Nola tensed. "We don't talk about it," I repeated. "Let's go to my room and play Nintendo." We spent the next few hours playing games, eating popcorn, and then watching movies. A typical sleepover, but I could see Holden was getting antsy. After my parents had wished us a good night, locked the blinds, and gone to bed, Holden stood up from his beanbag and walked over to where Nola and I were sitting on my bed. "Have you ever even tried looking?" he asked. "It's nearly time." Like most sleepovers, we'd conveniently ignored any suggestion of a bedtime. I was shocked to see he was right. It was almost 3 a.m. I sighed. "We don't,